A quick reminder, each episode could contain some game spoilers, so please listen or watch with discretion. And now, your hosts for The Gamer's Advocate, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Oh, I just remembered that Scottish person who exists in a space sci-fi game. I like that.
Space Scotland.
The fact that, like, that's a person I could go to Scotland and meet. And they exist in this over-the-top sci-fi fantasy world. And I'm just like, yeah, I still like that. I like that. More Scottish people in space games, please.
More Scottish representation. That is just, as a tiny side note, my favorite thing about Elden Ring is you're obviously in this horrible world. But like sort of like 1 in 3 of the NPCs and everyone in Rani's questline has very thick Welsh accents. So it's just like they've just put my cousins in it.
That was in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yeah.
Almost called it Drinquisition because that's my go-to for that one.
We'll set up a glossary later for the stream.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome to yet another Gamer's Advocate podcast. Thank you for coming on in. Today, we're going to be going over certain red flags and probably to, hopefully, another degree, green flags in gaming. Things that we are immediately turned off by certain aspects of those games, and things that you know might lend us to where maybe it was a game that we didn't think we were going to like, but it's got our attention now because it's got enough of these little things that have pulled us into it. But before we do all that, we're going to play a little game called That's Nice. We play this every once in a while, where we bring up a game and we say nothing but nice things for a few minutes about it. We're not going to cut ourselves off at 2 or 3 because there may be like 20 minutes we want to say nice about it. Never know. But it's my turn, yeah. So I'm going to bring up Mass Effect Andromeda. Can you guys say anything nice for a little while about Mass Effect Andromeda? We'll start with Banana.
So I think, I mean, I'm going to struggle with this one because I think one of the only things I've said about Andromeda so far on this podcast is that I don't remember it very well. But I will say, I think there are things that would have stood out as problematic and been memorable in that game. I don't remember a ton of gameplay issues. I remember the combat being fairly similar to Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect 2. It worked. It was engaging. It wasn't memorable, but I mean, not everything has to be. So I will say that I don't think they took big risks there and then ended up having those backfire in overhauling the combat system, which is good because I don't know that any of us looked at Mass Effect 3 and said, this doesn't work. We need a new combat system. So I think they made the right decision in kind of bringing that forward. It did feel like a Mass Effect game. It just didn't feel as engaging in terms of the story or the characters, which is upsetting, but it was a Mass Effect game in gameplay, and it felt that way all the way through. It did have that kind of build up to the finale that you saw across the trilogy. In a trilogy, it's a lot easier to do that build up well. But it existed in Andromeda, and as much as I forget the details of that game, I think that is my biggest criticism against it is that it wasn't memorable. I think if I genuinely hated the game, if there were so many glaring flaws, I'd have a lot more to say about them. I think it was just a very mid game, and the gameplay worked, so like that makes it forgettable. This doesn't sound like a that's nice, but like the fact that I can forget the game means it couldn't have been that bad.
It wasn't a 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a 4 or 5, whereas every other game in the Mass Effect series at that point was, an 8 or a 9. So it came in with a lot of pressure and unfortunately just didn't live up to that pressure. But it's not a game that I genuinely vitriolically hate. It's just a game I was disappointed in and then moved on. And I think if that game had been released as the intro to the Mass Effect series, I would have been much more forgiving. I would have been much more engaged. And then I would have been tremendously impressed with what they did with the trilogy. But because they had built up all of the goodwill with the trilogy, they established expectations. I feel like I was kind of destined to be a little harsher on Andromeda.
Would you have liked it better if it was just called Andromeda and then we kind of put together that it was a Mass Effect game versus Mass Effect Andromeda?
I feel like it would have been too heavy-handed to try and separate, to say that like, oh, it's just Andromeda, and then you play for 8 minutes and you meet Nasari and you're like, oh, it's a Mass Effect game. But yeah, I kind of get what you mean. I feel like there are games that just because of the title that appears on them get kind of a raw deal. We've talked about Legend of Zelda, and Zelda 2, Zelda 2 Link's Adventure. If that game had been released under a different title, I feel like it would have been far more successful. But it's because it's so different from the original Legend of Zelda, it doesn't feel right. But I think it's a genuinely great game. I feel like Andromeda is the counterpoint to that, where even if it didn't have the Mass Effect title on it, I'd know that it was a Mass Effect game, and I'd know that it was an inferior Mass Effect game. But an inferior Mass Effect game is not a shit game. It's not irredeemable. Whereas there are other games I've played that are genuinely terrible. Mass Effect Andromeda was just disappointing. I don't think that is as biting a criticism as I could leverage against many other games.
While Banana was talking, I was writing down little things I liked about it, and I found quite a few, which I was really pleasantly surprised. And I even wrote at the end of my list, do I want to replay? ? No, I don't, because I have a very similar opinion to Banana. It ended up being a disappointment. And disappointment is one of those critical feelings you can have about a game that can really be the death knell. It's similar to frustration that we talked about before. A game can be hard, but if it's frustrating, that's worse. Things I liked. I thought the vehicle handled really well. Can't remember the name of it, but the vehicle that you used to drive around the planets, thought that handled really well. And it was great to see that they had managed to evolve from the days of the Mako and from the days of the Hammerhead to make something that just felt great. And combine that with how beautiful it was, that they really made beautiful worlds. And there were some occasional moments when it really stood out as a visual epic. And I'm thinking of the first time dropping in on one of the desert planets, and you can see in the distance that sort of like metallic worm from Dune just going through the sands in the distance, going in and out. Just that moment of thinking, oh, what's that? And then later realizing you couldn't do anything with it, and it was just a GIF, essentially. Which sums up Andromeda for me. So much it could have been that it just wasn't. But I can just do a couple last ones. I thought the squad mate banter was very good. So not the actual on the ship stuff, but when you were in the vehicles, when you're out and about. But it got cut off sometimes. I remember that being a thing. And you wouldn't hear the end. So they never quite found that balance. Again, so close to what it could have been, but disappointing. Then there was the combat, which I think we've generally mostly agreed, with some exceptions, mostly agreed that it was good combat. It was well done. It was a nice evolution of the Mass Effect formula. And they found a way to just make it feel more exciting while still feeling true to Mass Effect. The addition of the jetpack, fantastic. And something that I didn't like at the time, but I've grown to appreciate more as time goes on, as I've seen it more and more in different games, the ability to respec. I thought it was very nice, especially when the game is average enough that I'm not going to play it again. I'm not going to rebuild a Biotic. I'm not going to rebuild an Adept. Let me just flick between them mid-game. This did, and it did that really well. So it was very friendly to the player in that way, and it did something that I really respect, was I felt in those moments, it respected my time, which I think is something games don't always do. And now, especially slowly getting older, I appreciate when a game does that. When a game says, I know you only have X amount of hours in the week, let me help you out. And I think I had one last point, which was the characters weren't that memorable, but I mentioned in a recent stream or a recent podcast that I didn't find Tali memorable in Mass Effect 1 either. There is the issue that they never had the chance to become memorable, at least not the whole cast. It is true, Mass Effect 1, I already liked Rex. I already liked Garrus. I just didn't have time to like everyone. Maybe with another game they could have turned that around. I'm not sure. But there was plenty of good in the game. It's a 5 out of 10 game that gets pulled down to a 4 because of the Mass Effect label. It's cursed by the Mass Effect label. If it was a 7, the Mass Effect label would have pulled it up to an 8. But being in that lower half, it pulls it down because I just wanted so much more. It wasn't a bad game. It was a disappointing game.
I think it was called, the Nomad? I think that was what it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Com's assessment. There was one thing that I remembered. I remembered the cutoff banter that you were talking about. I do remember being a little irritated by that because it was good. It was interesting. I wanted to hear those conversations play out. And the one other thing that I remembered, which honestly I can't even really give it to Andromeda because it exists in another game, was that kind of echolocation pulse to find items of interest. I love that exists because that was one of the things that, like, I think when I was younger and I had all the time in the world, I didn't mind exploring every nook and cranny to find hidden items because it was so rewarding when you did. But now that I don't have as much time, I just want to get that item. I don't need that risk reward of wasting time and then finding out there was nothing there. I very much appreciated that was in the game.
I think what we like about it is it was competent and it was user friendly,
Mm-hmm.
which sadly is also how you would describe a website. It's how you describe
It's
a
the Excel
car
of
manual.
gaming.
Yeah, it's a shame. It could have been so much more. But I agree, especially at that last final note, the echolocation. It's a good little feature. Yes, there is probably a better way to do this with more intuitive design, making it more clear what you're allowed to interact with, what you can find, better visual clues. But as a respecter of one's time, it's a good feature. I think we can see there's plenty to like in Andromeda.
Things like Drax. He was a great character to me. Because he was a Krogan in the Elder State. So you got to see the lore and where Krogans go when they get to live that long. So we know Rex is not that old in retrospect. He's probably, midlife. He's in his midlife stage. So we get to have some structure there and see that. So, and a lot of the lore that was pulled in from the original Mass Effect is not inconsistent with Andromeda. And that's what I really looked at. I was really like, where are they going to try to take this story and say where Mass Effect was wrong? And this is now we know they're trying to retcon basically through Andromeda, and they didn't do that. So I respected that. So a lot of the lore that you see, like with Liara and her interactions and possibly the Elusive Man, we don't really know that. But a lot of the lore that we had with the old Mass Effect titles is consistent in Andromeda. The class building that you were talking about, Com, that was superior in Andromeda, without a doubt. And this is coming from someone who loves Mass Effect 3's class building. I thought that the Andromeda class building was unique and fresh, and it really gave you the ability to manipulate how you want your class to be built. Did you want it to be mostly tech and then some biotic? I mean, just because you don't have the biotic ability, it's kind of like Star Wars power. Either you have the Force or you don't have the Force. Well, you might have a little bit, tiny little bit of the Force. That's what Andromeda lets you do. And I was like, oh man, if they had put this in Mass Effect 3, I would have been like, it's the greatest game of, well, I still think it's one of the greatest games of all, but this is by far, head and shoulders, the greatest game of all time. You put that class building in Mass Effect 3, I'm on board.
This is it. And I think maybe the best thing that we can take away from Andromeda as a whole is there are really useful things that they can hopefully bring into Mass Effect 4. There is no reason to abandon everything they did. Some of the stuff that they put in this is genuine progress. So if we can use the good bits from this, yeah, there's a lot of garbage as well. So get rid of that. And if we can take the good, there's no reason we can't improve Mass Effect 4. Just imagine Mass Effect 3 if in between areas we did have more party banter. There's some, but I want more.
Yeah.
Just imagine if the vehicles in the early Mass Effects did feel better. Just imagine if we did have that really fine-tuned class building. Maybe it bodes well for Mass Effect 4. And also, I think we can maybe be optimistic because they recognize their mistakes. There's a reason they didn't make the DLC. There's a reason, which is a shame. There is a reason that they abandoned the IP. They know people didn't like a lot of it. I just hope they learned the right lessons
I
from
like
it.
to think that Legion was a big part of the reason they didn't make the DLC.
It was a big letter writing campaign.
Yeah.
The protests in front of the headquarters probably didn't help.
Yeah.
Oh, with the signs, yeah.
Where did you even find a soapbox? I mean,
The riots that were all over Vancouver. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, how many of them were real and how many of them did you pay?
Well, that's where the family fortune went.
I love that channel lore. The idea that Legion is now like kind of struggling to get by because of how much money he invested in the counter Andromeda campaign he put together.
This is getting referenced later and people are going to wonder what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Andromeda 2 comes out. Oh, hell no.
Legion's selling blood to fund this one.
They're just going to get one more letter just with your logo on it sent to their office and they'll know they've messed up.
Red flags, maybe some green flags.
Mostly red.
What are some things that would turn you off to a game when you were to hear about a game, maybe it gets your interest, but then you say, maybe not. You have any examples, Com?
I don't think I've got any solid red flags with games because the ones that I initially think of, I have games that I will play despite the presence of them, particularly if there's a way of avoiding it. So, for example, microtransactions and particularly loot boxing and gambling. I am very close to having that being a red flag for me. Gambling as a whole, the promotion of gambling in wider society, gambling advertising, grosses me out. It really, really grosses me out, particularly the advertising of it. And I do see it as a very unpleasant way to put an acceptable face on gambling. It's not treated with the seriousness that it deserves to be treated with, so I can find that very, very icky, for lack of a better word. But I still play FIFA without engaging with the loot box mechanics. But there's no way around the fact that it is a huge part of the game. There are people who play the online modes, the ultimate team modes, which are really built around loot box mechanics. So that would be a close one, is loot boxes. And the other that I initially went to, and it's not a red flag for me again, but it's close. It raises doubts in my mind, is open world. I find open world to be a little bit off-putting, and possibly it's an oversaturation of that kind of game in the last few years to the point that I've become burnt out on them. Perhaps it's a criticism of the Ubisoftization of open world. If you imagine when you think of open world, if you think of climbing a tower to unlock things on a map, that. And something we've mentioned already actually in this podcast, the idea of respecting one's time. I feel these games don't always respect my time, and it can become a frustrating exercise in box ticking. So that game raises doubts. That idea, that concept raises doubts in me about a game. But then I love Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is open world and actually is multiple open worlds. So I don't really have a solid red flag where I will say definite no, but I've got quite a few dark orange flags.
Well, I think that's kind of the nature of red flags, is that people will see them and it serves more as kind of a warning, and people will ignore warnings all the time. So a red flag for me, I don't think is something that will completely turn me off of a game. It is something that I will immediately recognize as a game and given that my personality tends towards presenting game reviews very negatively, it's something that I will have to talk about when I bring up a game. So, and I think that is kind of the nature of the gaming community, is that we kind of have to accept games with red flags, because the alternative is not playing a game. And if you have all of these red flags that I do, you won't play any game,
I
because
think in
every
that case,
game has one.
yeah, in that case, then I'll withdraw the sort of finicky playing around the edges, and I will just say those are my red flags. And I'm going to throw one more in there as well. And this is probably the closest I have to a real I will not play this. Review embargoes on video games, where you can only have the review released on release date. That I find to be a massive turnoff, because I immediately start thinking, well, what are you hiding then? And this, for example, gave me with Rebirth, they released the reviews like a good week before the game came out. And this meant that long before the reviews came out, I was confident, because I was thinking, well, if there's something to hide, they're going to hide it. So review embargoes for me are a big one.
When they do like a game day release review, I can almost understand that, but with the exception of, did you make this video 2 weeks ago? And in which case, I don't need that. I needed that 2 weeks ago. I see what you're saying. But at the same time, if they're actually doing a day one release, just because it's going to include spoilers, it's going to include some story elements that you need to know about to play the game, for instance, that would make more sense why it's a day one review, you know?
I wouldn't give them that much credit.
Oh, okay.
If you want to do a spoiler review, do one as well. But if you're trying to offer me genuine purchase advice on what I should be feeling in advance of getting this game, I'm going to need that spoiler review. I was talking more about, and I'm not going to choose my words that carefully, but I'm also not going to be that insulting. I'm talking about genuine video game journalism. A lot of what you find on YouTube does not qualify as genuine video game journalism. I'm listening to the amount of supposedly high quality reviewing taking place on this platform, and we can probably include us in this at times, is the prose of a 14-year-old written with the critical faculties of a 13-year-old, spoken by a 20-year-old trapped in a 12-year-old's body. It's incredibly uninspiring, poor work. Not everything. There are exceptions. But I think there is a very clear difference between actual journalism. There's a real difference between actual journalism and this YouTube reviewing. And like I say, for me, if you want to say that you're doing it on day one because of spoilers, etc., have the common decency to help out your audience, to help out the people who come to you for advice on this, because we need to trust you. Until I buy this game, I have no way of knowing if it's any good. I need your help on this. Give me that spoiler-free review.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't like the idea of controlling reviews for a game at all, with the exception of review bombing. That's one of those things, like, if you're discouraging review bombing, I'm fine with that, because that is just, if there's a genuine criticism, it will appear in a lot of reviews, and it will not be considered review bombing. It will be, a lot of people are aware of this issue. But if you're getting review bombed, it's likely you took a stance on something, and loud people are upset about that. So if you're going to say, like, we're not allowing these reviews because they were superficial, they're meaningless, they're just an agenda being pushed on our game, I understand that. Any other reason for controlling the reviews of your game, I'm not on board with. The concept of microtransactions, the idea of that predatory pricing to squeeze every last penny out of your property, that disgusts me. I cannot stand how incredibly pervasive that is in the video gaming industry now. How it's just something that we all accept. It's so lazy. I don't understand how it became acceptable. The idea that I can buy a game and I'm not given access to the entirety of that game unless I spend more money is infuriating. And it took me a long time to come around to the idea of paid DLC. That's something I'm okay with. Microtransactions, no. Even some versions of DLC, no. Day one paid DLC, go fuck yourself. That is disgusting.
I had that one written down, and the only reason I didn't mention it was, first of all, it was just getting a bit long-winded, and there were a few points already to take.
That's what this channel's all about.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was our brand. And the secondary reason was I was hoping, just because I haven't seen it so much, that we had largely passed the days of it. But I don't know how right that is.
It does seem to be very uncommon at this point. Not unheard of, but it's not popular. And it shouldn't be. It is very much an indication of yeah, we built this. It's part of the game. We're going to withhold it until you pay us more. That infuriates me.
Yeah. One of the beauties, I think, of the internet and what it does with gaming is we can simply and easily have expansion packs and a real DLC. We can do that so easily. But day one, that's just blocking us out of something that should have been in the base game. You have made this explicitly to come out on day one. It's a part of the product. That should be included in the headline price.
Absolutely.
A situation kind of like when I'm thinking like loot crates, because loot crates can be unlocked if you just, pay the developer like $5 and you get like X amount of loot crates. But there's also mechanics in a lot of those games that you can get them yourselves through the gameplay. So, like I said, that's not really a red flag to me, because as long as there's an alternative method of actually just playing the game, but it is a form of pay to win, so that kind of gives it a bad moniker,
I think the idea of purely cosmetic things in loot crates, I'm not super worried about. I don't like them, but it's not as devastating as genuine pay to win.
See, there I would like to jump in because I don't know when this became okay. I remember when Oblivion came out. This was always the egregious one, was the Oblivion horse armor. And I remember when that came out, the outrage, if we can call it that, of people decrying the fact that we were paying just for aesthetics, just for something we should be unlocking in the game. I don't know why that suddenly became acceptable, that this would be okay, that we should be able to purchase these aesthetics as the game adds them in over time after release. I think the only reason we say it's okay is because the pay to win is so much more egregious. Mm-hmm. So that we say it's okay by comparison to what a game could be doing. I've got to say, I still find it quite grim, borderline nauseating, if there are skins, for example. And I think the most easy example of this, I don't have experience, so correct me if I'm wrong, would be something like Fortnite, would be something like Apex, would be something like Fall Guys, which sadly did bring it into their game. The idea of skins hidden exclusively behind money. If there is a way to unlock these reasonably through gameplay, if you can pay $2 or you can play 10 hours and unlock the same thing, I'm fine with that.
Yeah. That's the big distinction for me. Yeah. If it's exclusively behind a paywall, I'm not on board with it.
Well, for me, I always think, and I don't want to come across all 90s Congress hearings, but I always end up in the sort of like think of the children thing. I hate the idea that in a kid's game, there is something hidden behind a paywall like that, and exclusively, because I was a kid and I was a prick to my friends. Like, absolutely. And it's just another thing to mark a kid out as different. Mm-hmm. Like, if your family maybe can't put in that extra €5 for that one skin, or that €10 for the battle pass, whatever it might be, and you're blocked off from all of this. If you or me play Fortnite, I don't think we really care if we're stuck on the basic skin with just the person wearing the camo or whatever. We don't really care. If you're a 10-year-old and your friends are all playing with the fancy stuff, it must be just another way to be isolated. And we've somehow decided that's okay because it's only aesthetics, because it's not pay to win.
I think you've actually just pointed out something that makes me a little more tolerant of something that I was going to label as one of my red flags, and that is those season passes. I don't think they're nearly as egregious as microtransactions, but I don't like the idea of turning my hobby into a job. Children don't have jobs. They do have a shitload of free time that they will probably spend playing a video game they love. they should be rewarded for investing their time in that video game. I am fully on board with a season pass to unlock stuff that you could get if you paid for it. I'm not a huge fan of the premium season pass. The idea that I both have to pay you and work for something. Go fuck yourself. Either I work for it or you give it to me because I paid for it. Not both.
So we're
That
talking
is
about,
absurd.
for example, if there's a 50 level season pass with 50 pieces of costume or whatever, you can either choose to level up and grind, or you can just say on day one, I'll pay you $15. Give me all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I would be okay with that. The ones I'm infuriated by are there's a 50 level season pass. 25 of those are free. 25 of those are on the premium season pass, which you have to pay for.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much speaking the same
language.
language.
Don't give me a job after I pay you. That's ridiculous. But this all comes down to one of my biggest issues with the gaming industry and the direction it's gone since I was a kid, which is that people recognize that the gaming industry makes a lot of money, and they had to get in there and poison it with the same approaches they use in every other industry to say, how can we make more money by just destroying this industry? When I was a kid, games had to be good in order for you to make money off of them. Now, games can make money by being frustrating. And you just throw microtransactions in to appease those frustrated people.
I think we can put a small caveat on it, which is broadly agreeing with the point. It's just a caveat, really. The idea of the consistent revenue stream that a game, even that felt gross saying that, the consistent revenue stream that it's going to be good for the shareholders. That idea, we did have it with the arcade machines. And then we got away from it. We recognized, I like to think we did, at least gamers did. Maybe the companies didn't. But as gamers, we recognized that we wanted to pay that one time, take the experience home and get a good game. Whereas the arcade games were made to be artificially difficult. They were made to be a 25-cent quarter. Sorry, that's the one. They were made to be a quarter consuming machine that you would literally have to keep on playing. I mean, how many of those old arcade games were there where none of your friends ever finished one of them? Just because they were nigh on impossible and you couldn't save and things like that. So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I just wanted to add that one caveat that I think we're not even finding a new experience. We're actually going back to the one awful thing about the arcade experience where we're just putting quarters in now.
And it's funny that you brought that up as like the continuing revenue stream. That is one of the most disgusting concepts I think I've ever heard. Is let's release something that will make us money indefinitely. No, no, that doesn't exist anywhere. The idea that you can continue to make money off of something that you've done once, I mean, unless you're the police and we're talking about every breath you take, I'm not on board with you continuing to make money off of this. Like, royalties on songs, I'm okay with. Video games where it's just pay me to continue playing, to continue getting cosmetics, to get me to tweak a few bytes in a specific specific memory location. No, that's just nonsense. That's so predatory. That's
the word.
Very much we have all the power, give us money and we'll concede the smallest amount. It's just disgusting to me.
This is it. It's that power dynamic that's there. Because you can choose not to purchase these games. You can. But if you don't do that, you just don't get to play. You don't get to experience the thing that maybe you've been waiting for. Maybe it means something to you. Maybe all your friends are playing it. Now you're the one loser who isn't. It's a power dynamic. And you are the smallest.
Yeah.
And it's not a power dynamic with any equilibrium whatsoever.
Right.
It is completely weighted the other way.
And that's exactly what I meant when I was talking about what a red flag means to me. We as gamers don't have any mechanism for fixing things. We can either boycott a game or play a game we spent money on that has things we hate.
Yeah.
We don't have any mechanism to say, no, this is horrific that you included this element in your game. Go fix that while I play everything that's not related to that. Because if you keep playing their game, they'll keep preying on you. And that's what infuriates me the most about this.
I wanted to add on to the that ongoing revenue stream idea. These have a place. The idea of something you don't own, the idea of a rental service, that has a place. Think of something like, for example, when I've recorded music before, generally I didn't need a large piece of high-end music software for life. I needed it for a month, 2 months, with as many plugins as I could get access to. And most of these, what they will do is they will have a subscription service. And generally it's non-contractual, so you can cancel month by month. So you could either buy it and all of its plugins, etc., for around 700, 800 quid, or you could rent it for a month for 40. That has a place. I think high-value things that people use once or twice, there is a place in this world for subscription models for them and for ongoing ways of monetizing them. I just think games just don't fit into it. They're not that kind of purchase. They're not that kind of tool. They're fundamentally different.
One thing in gaming that I feel does fit that model, and it's so the equivalent of Game Pass for Xbox or PC. I believe Sony has their own version of that.
Yeah, PlayStation Plus, I think.
Subscription service that gives you access to video games that you wouldn't purchase in addition to this subscription service. I love that idea. I had Game Pass for a long time. I'm a big fan. I like the fact that I can look through my library at a bunch of games that I may remember when they were announced or may remember when they were released. And I just thought, I'm not going to spend money on that. But now I have this subscription service and I have access to all of those games. And now I can give them a chance. And I might find a game that I absolutely love that I wouldn't have given that chance initially because it didn't have the marketing behind it that a huge game did, or it just didn't generate that buzz in the player base that would have led me to look into it a little more. I love that idea. I don't need that in one specific game. I don't need a subscription service to WoW. I don't need to continue paying a developer for a product they're just barely maintaining. And WoW is a little different because they have, their DLC, but I don't need DLC to be paid for and a subscription for one game. That's too much. You're just being predatory again. You're just saying you're gonna put up with this because there's no other option.
And I think that's really the sweet spot you've nailed right there, is that across the board as a service attached to your console, giving you access to all of these games makes sense. And I think it's because it's cost effective. It's about as close as consumer friendly as the industry really gets. The Xbox Game Pass, the PlayStation Plus service, it genuinely feels like it's good for gamers. Whether it's good for game studios is another thing entirely, especially smaller ones. But for us, there's a lot of benefit to get there. And I think that's an example where game studios have realized that basic truth about piracy. The fact that piracy exists, will continue to exist, and your service, the thing that keeps your games from being pirated, the things that keeps your music from being pirated, is really a question of convenience. Are you a bit more convenient than piracy, and are you reasonably priced? If you are, we will generally consider continuing to pay you this money. Otherwise, we're going to go and find the other route. It's what made Steam, I think, so successful. Just this immensely user-friendly platform. Good sales going on about as often as you can. When is there not a Steam sale on? I mean, if there's not a Steam sale, there's a summer sale. If it's not a summer sale, there's a fall sale. If it's not a fall sale, there's a weekend sale. But that's across the idea of a video game storefront. It's a collection of video games. That within a game as a single video game feels gross. Any subscription service, any monthly cost for what really has been culturally established as a one-off purchase.
When WoW came out, I was 2 months shy of being 30. And the typical WoW crowd now, though, has grown up with WoW or was already an adult when they started playing WoW. they're in an income where they can afford it, and Blizzard knows it. It's not a bunch of kids. So you say what about the children? There's not a lot of children playing WoW. I bet you the predominant market is adults. And that's where the income is coming from. And that's why they can gouge it. Now you take another game like Star Wars The Old Republic, who I am a big advocate of. I love that game. It did have DLCs. You did have to pay for them originally. But now if you have a monthly subscription, you get all of that. It's all included. So, and you get what's called cartel coins, and you get them automatically. So you can use that to spend on cosmetics and things. So things that they just throw at you, just things you don't have to have. So it's not a pay to win. It's just something you can get. But that's the difference between WoW and another game like that. So they're both MMOs. They just operate very differently. You're paying for a subscription, just the right to play WoW. And SWTOR is more or less, they're trying to get you to play it because they're including everything with that subscription too. But yeah, I do think you have a market that is playing those MMOs that is a little fundamentally different too. They're in an income bracket that can more or less afford it. Whether it's affordable or not is not the question. That's the devil's in the details because they're able to sell it and it's being bought. So,
which is a very corporate friendly answer.
Yeah. I think that ties directly into the point I was trying to make is studios are focused on the money now. And we like to think of video games as a medium, an art medium.
Yeah.
They're an art form. You should not be focusing on the money when you're making art.
I think this is where you'll find that we said almost opposite things and yet didn't disagree with each other. I think that what you just said is I think what both you and I and Banana think is what the studio are thinking. 100%. I think the only thing is we don't like it. We just find it in and of itself morally repugnant. It's that moral level, it's the spiritual level. I understand the practicality of why they do this. And the reason GTA 6 hasn't been released yet, and the reason GTA 5 doesn't have DLC in the traditional questing DLC is they know that they can make more money than that off the GTA Online credit cards. They don't need to do anything else, so they won't.
But I think you've actually pointed out one of the kind of major elements that make it so repugnant to me is that you said Blizzard is not making their game for children. They are targeting an audience that has the revenue to spend money on their game. And we keep talking about gaming as if it's an art form. And if you're excluding people who are poor, you're not making art. You're preying on people. You're saying those people have no value to us because we can't get paid.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
And it's a strange thing. I firmly believe that great art needs to be simultaneously inaccessible and entirely accessible. It needs to be inaccessible in that sense of you need to be telling me something interesting. It needs to be hard to understand. There needs to be something odd going on here, something progressive, something different. But in terms of just being able to go and watch it, just being able to go and play it, it needs to be accessible. And that's where I think then we get that hackles rising, the hairs on the back of the neck standing up, and that sort of the fight instinct is the idea that not that we're not making a game for kids, that's fine. It's that we're making a game for a specific sort of financial group. What would you call it? Is the AB1s or the I can't remember what the social strata are, but that.
If you're saying your art is only appropriate for certain people in this tax bracket, you're an asshole. Like that's ridiculous.
Can I just piggyback on exactly that? What Banana just said, just imagine I just said that too. Because that was exactly what I want.
I had a year annual pass for me and the family pass for the Museum of Natural Sciences. I had the one for the Fine Arts. I had the one for the zoo. And fortunately, they're all in that exact area. But oftentimes, what was kind of weird is that I would go on the days that they had a free day anyway. And that was always neat because there was more people there. So there's something there that you're hitting on as far as the art corresponding with society, the give and take. If you only take, you're gonna get this a reputation. You're gonna get this intangible thing that links you to bad. But if there is that give and take, then there's always, you're not going to see art as always bad. Like if you think of art as being this high society thing, but you can go on a free day at the art museum, you might appreciate it more because you've seen other people having, enjoying themselves. You're able to communicate about it. And so there's this mass appeal because of the association, the societal association here. You're excluding people, and that is kind of, I guess, where you're going with the whole red flag thing. It's a bigger picture thing.
Well, the idea of art being hidden behind elitism is what grosses me out. And elitism on a social level, but also that financial level. So you could have that it's not deemed right for a certain class of people. You could have it that it's not made accessible because of financial reasons. For myself, I love poetry. I love poetry. I like memorizing poetry. I like reading new poetry. But as a kid, I didn't get the impression that poetry was made for people like me. That was a posh kids thing. That was a private school thing. And honestly, that's why I started liking it, because the pettiness rose up within me. If that's not supposed to be for me, then screw you. It's going to be for me. And I'm going to start liking that. And I feel it's one of the greatest things in my life that's ever happened, is becoming interested in poetry.
Being petty.
It's being petty. I am motivated by it, fueled by it, and everything good I've done has come from that. But my brain now, I feel, it's sort of like it's furnished with beautiful things. It's just this idea of it goes in and it just stays there. And those beautiful phrases that you once read, the beautiful couplets that you once read, the beautiful poems you once read, they're a part of you. And they're what makes being a human actually interesting, is having that. And I was just checking which museums, just on your note, are free where I live. And yeah, the Museum of Fine Arts, it's free. The Museum of Antiquities, it's free. The Ceramic Museum, it's free. They're not all, especially the small private collection museums, they're not. But if something is state-run, it's free. Not everyone's going to go there, but they can. And that's where that grossness for me would come from, is putting it behind a paywall to the point that people might not want to go there, but also people just can't. And that sucks.
I think that is at its core the issue that I have with so much of this. And this is definitely going to sound like, bananas on the street corner passing out poorly Xerox communist manifestos again. But it's very much the fact that you have taken something that is inherently culturally valuable and associated it with commerce, to the point that there are people who are involved in this industry who see art solely for its financial value and not for its cultural value. And it is so pervasive in the video gaming industry that we've just come to accept certain things that are objectively awful practices. They're just things we acknowledge exist. They're things we have to tolerate because we're gamers. And it's so frustrating for me that it's this obvious. This injustice is so very apparent, to the point where we'll send this video out, and I'm sure people will listen to it, watch the video, listen to the podcast, and agree with us, and then go back to playing these games.
I'm going to.
And
I'm not being flippant. I will.
Yeah, no, I will as well. I will sit there and seethe about how commercial my favorite games are becoming. But there's nothing we can do. And that is the frustrating element of it. The fact that we can all kind of agree this is a problem, and yet feel like it's not a problem we can solve.
And this is the thing, we're not taking it to any logical extremity of the ideology. For example, I'm fine that a game costs money. I'm fine with that. Yeah. I'm not saying that they should all be available instantly right now for me. I recognize that artists need to be paid, creators need to be paid.
Absolutely.
I'm not okay with the rest of it, and particularly the subscription service in the game. So it's not that we're ideologically opposed to the idea of money being in this. It's the way that it's done, and it's the point to which it's arrived, rather than the fundamental ideological relationship between money and art.
Well, y'all have convinced me. I will no longer play these games. I will remember the scripture, calm 3:16, through spite, all things are possible. So.
That is way better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I was no. Calm 3:16, through spite, all things are possible. I'm getting it.
I feel like that's one of those brief gems that we'll come across in our podcast. That's where we get most poetic, is when we talk about our spiteful, petty, and just animosity towards the industry we've chosen to discuss.
But that gives you an idea of how pure it is, because that's where this comes from. It's from that deep wellspring inside you, isn't it? You can't feel this outrage to something you don't care about.
Right.
You can only feel this
right.
outrage because you give a shit.
That's it at its core. Every one of us is a Philadelphia sports fan, and we boo because we want to cheer. I don't know. That is the definition of Philadelphia sports fans. Philadelphia sports fans are angry all the time,
No matter what,
because they want to be happy, and our sports teams just won't let us.
They threw batteries at Santa, so
he shouldn't have been there. That story is exceptional because it highlights how much we wanted to cheer. Our team was playing so bad that there was nothing that could redeem it for us, not even Santa.
So we'll go over like a couple maybe green flags, things that like maybe might entice you back into the game that you would have ordinarily said, I don't really care for this game. I mean, for me, I would have said maybe Baldur's Gate 3, because they announced that there wouldn't be any microtransactions or anything like that, despite people even asking for them. I even asked, I said, I need something to give a different colored dice. Like, let me use my die. Maybe $1 will unlock the dice looking thing, and I can just use die or something too.
Well, I feel like the mod community took over that.
Right.
They did an excellent job. But yeah, no, I agree. I think Baldur's Gate 3 was a perfect example of one of those games where they could have gone down this road of everything we've talked about, because it was received so well. People loved that game that they could have then leveraged that goodwill to sell a bunch of crap that didn't measure up to the original game. But they didn't. And that is one of those rare occurrences in the video gaming industry where you can see kind of this weird paragon of basic decency to say, oh, we're not going to be predatory, even though it would probably work out for us.
Yeah, they've added so many additional endings to the game. I would say it's a DLC all to itself, and it's been free, 100% free.
Oh yeah, the fact that they continue to release updates for that game, fixing things, adding new content, it's just, I have a tremendous respect for Larian and all of the work they've done on that game.
They still have not let me edit the name of bags, and that is a big issue for me. They will not listen to me. I've sent them tons of tweets. I've sent them lots of mail, and I'm going to break out my Mass Effect crew, my Andromeda crew to Larian.
Break out the checkbook.
Yeah.
I was going to offer you just another name of a game, where you have the ongoing support, and it's just a much bigger studio, which might come with that sort of surprise. The Spider-Man games on the PlayStation, they continue to add new suits, and the suits are all unlockable within the game. There is paid DLC in the sense of new storylines and new missions, but all of those little aesthetic bonuses, you unlock the suits, much like you used to do in old video games where you had to complete objectives within the game, complete tasks, get to a certain point in the story. Very large studio, big AAA title, and they don't go down that route. They have managed to completely avoid that. And that, for me, was a huge bonus. When I heard about that, when they were releasing the Spider-Man game, I was excited. I really was excited. But I was waiting for the first inkling of something to go wrong. And then the moment that they said there was going to be no paid suits in the game, it really got me going. I was like, okay, this is the easiest opportunity you will ever have to monetize this. And you're not doing it. Show me what you got.
it's funny that like the first green flags we could think of were simply the absence of red flags. Like the idea that like they could have gone down this predatory pricing path and they chose not to, and that's a green flag, when in reality it's just not being an asshole.
Yeah, I think we have to, if we're going to do green flags, we have to find something we haven't mentioned and just not just invert it.
So I do actually have one, which is surprising for me because I don't enjoy things.
Except pro wrestling.
For me, one of the biggest examples of like a unique green flag that I absolutely loved discovering was the Friends Pass that was included in It Takes Two. The idea that one person could own the game and with this Friends Pass invite somebody on their friends list to join them, even if that friend didn't have the game, to play a co-op game that, I mean, it would work as a couch co-op game. They're very much just focused on the fact that like this is couch co-op for somebody who's not on your couch.
I had never heard of that. That is fantastic.
That is
honestly
wow. Absolutely brilliant idea. I mean, I loved that game already, so this wasn't like something that made me consider getting into it, but it was just so refreshing to see people just be like, our goal is to make a good game and to make sure that people can play it.
Yeah, because you can't play it by yourself.
So incredible to me. That's I mean, the fact that that's rare is disappointing, but like I'm so happy with that game making this decision to say, oh yeah, we're not going to charge you for a second copy so you and a friend can play. We want you to be able to play.
That's wonderful. That's really, it's consumer friendly, and as you say, it's continuing that tradition. It's the closest it feels like you might get to couch co-op. Yeah, couch co-op does exist in some rare occasions, but that is the closest I think that we'll get to a continuing of that legacy in on the game. That's wonderful. I love that.
Well, there might be a game series that I know both of you are very familiar with, not me so much, but it's riddled with a lot of the things that you guys have been saying are red flags, but you still play it anyway. That's Dead by Daylight.
I got 4 hours in that game, man. 4.
I have under 200. I watch more Dead by Daylight than play. And I honestly didn't start playing until I had watched for hundreds of hours. So I enjoy that game more as a spectacle than I do as a game.
I'm in the sadly ignorant position that I actually don't know what you're talking about. I don't mean that as a judgment of you. I know nothing about it. All I've done is installed the base game and picked a survivor and played.
Dozens of microtransactions.
Ah, okay. I just haven't found them yet. That's all.
So that is, the microtransactions in that game are the alternative to playing that game. So these are things that you can unlock in-game for free. You don't need to pay for them, with the exception of the DLC packages. And there's a lot of DLC packages. But even those DLC packages, I'm not really concerned about. Most of them I feel are reasonably priced for what you're getting. Some of them not so much, but overwhelmingly it's in the range of like $10. You get a survivor, a killer, and then everybody gets a new map. So the map is part of the base game. Everybody will get that regardless of whether or not they have the survivor and the killer. And again, the survivor and the killer are obtainable usually by just playing the game a lot. It's a shit ton of hours that you have to invest to get to that point. But usually they are available by just playing the game. Which is weird because I actually have a ton of negative things to say about Dead by Daylight. But I actually think that this is one of those things they did a good job with. They're not tremendously predatory.
You guys have brought up all those things, but they are in Dead by Daylight. And that's why I just wanted to see where your difference of point of view on that game.
Oh yeah, and I think we've talked about these things and said like there are mitigating factors that allow us to kind of accept when these things are in a game, and Dead by Daylight has those. I will say I prefer the game without them, but I mean, we'd have to overhaul society to do that.
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to get there.
I'm trying to think how to say it politely. It almost feels like the answer is so obvious that it doesn't need to be dealt with. Just because you're not happy with the way that the gaming world has evolved and with the practices that you have in games, it doesn't mean you have to return to just playing card games. It's the environment, you're stuck in it, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a game that I play. I have thousands of hours in these games, but it's Planet Coaster.
So it's not Mass Effect.
Yeah, it's Planet Coaster. It's not Apex for sure, right?
Oh my god.
And but no, Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo. I have thousands of hours in those, and the community that plays those always buys the DLC. It's like it's not even an option, but they don't really. I wouldn't say that they like in Planet Zoo. Like you would think, oh, it's all about new animals and stuff. I could care less about the animals. I'm here for like the little assets and things so that I can build what I want to build and make this, very unique scene. Whether it's a park or a zoo or whatever, but you can really get in depth with it, make it very immersive, and I don't know. It's a really good game. But I mean, the community that plays that, it's almost like expected. Like if they come out with 10 DLCs, you're gonna buy 10 DLCs. They're just so good at what they do. I mean, with the Planet Coaster, they had like a Ghostbusters, a Monsters theme, a Back to the Future theme, and it's not that the theme itself is really what you're there for. It's like, oh, well, you get this car that would go over this thing, so it's when you're riding a roller coaster, you'll see this stunt go by or something like that. You can kind of integrate it into your scene, and I don't know. It's one of those that like it's full of DLCs, but I mean, the community loves it. So.
It reminded me of another game, and then almost a question that you have to pose to yourself. So the other game it reminded me of was The Sims, which, of course, is almost the king of DLCs. Then it put me into mind of American Truck Simulator, where you have to keep purchasing state by state. I think you had the first 3, to begin with, which might have been Arizona, Nevada, maybe California. Could be wrong. But it was just this one corner of the USA. And then if you want to get the rest, you're going to need 47 DLCs, assuming they include Alaska and Hawaii. That's an enormous amount. And if we're doing all of a sudden, then we're getting overseas territories.
Hawaii Truck Simulator.
It's going to be, I kind of want that now. Hurry up, guys. Yeah. And then it put me onto that thought when you were describing Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo, that you said you want the DLC so that, you can build this the way you want. To me, that sounds like a pure aesthetic DLC that I think is borderline predatory. But for you, it's not that. So you almost have to decide on a game-by-game basis, you yourself, what does this mean to me? Is this DLC justified? And for you, clearly, completely justified. In the same way that I think people could look at me and say, you really shouldn't be buying that Truck Simulator DLC, but I do.
Yeah. Well, a friend of the channel for all of us, I Banana included, Maffy, I
have friends.
Yeah. Yeah, she's an artist. She's a game artist, and she's the same way with me. With Planet Zoo and Planet Coaster, we're like all into it, and that's what she does. She does graphic art for games, and she's down with the DLCs when it comes to those things. But just like I said, it hits all those boxes that are red flags, but sometimes it depends on the game.
Yeah, you draw your own personal line. That's a very normal human thing to do.
I don't want to just echo everything that Com said, but also I'm going to do that. So I think with games like Planet Coaster, The Sims, Truck Simulator, it's really tough to figure out what a DLC should be, because with a lot of the other games that we play, the DLC is typically something you haven't experienced before. It's typically a new story, a new event, something that was not part of the base game. And with these categories, these games we're talking about, it feels like it's very much a cosmetic applied to the base game. it's not a new experience so much as it is just getting things to look the way you really wanted them originally. But I get it in those games because it's a ton of work. There are so many people working to generate that new content. It might not be a new experience, but it is a ton of effort to get an additional state in Truck Simulator, an additional collection of items to put in your house in The Sims, an additional theme for your amusement park. It's a ton of effort, and those people deserve to be compensated for that effort. It's just a very different version of DLC than you might see from something like Borderlands, where it's a new campaign, essentially. Another smaller version of the game where you experience new stuff. Maybe you'll meet new characters. You'll definitely go to new places. It's a lot more obvious to me that the DLC is a separate package in a game like Borderlands, whereas in The Sims, Planet Coaster, Truck Simulator, it doesn't feel separate. It feels like something they would have loved to include in the original game, but when you take into account all of the work that needed to be done to deliver that, the original game price would be $1 billion. It's absurd to try and think of that, of everything they should have included, and then say, yeah, but it stays a $60 game.
Yeah, and specifically because it's the one I know with Truck Simulator, for example, that's been out now for what, 5-6 years? American Truck Simulator. So you've got 5-6 years of overheads. You've got 5-6 years of paying staff. You've got 5-6 years of pension contributions. You've got 5-6 years of everything. And this is just what makes it, along with everything, just a kind of grubby topic to get your hands on as well. And I think you have to really you have to apply the smell test to every game that you come across. You have to look at each game in and of itself, and outside of some egregious examples, you have to decide, does this look like does this look predatory? Does this smell predatory? Because if it does, it probably is. But you have to go genre by genre, game by game for the ones that interest you, and then you make your personal decision on top of that. And there's nothing wrong, I might add, with you as a consumer. If you are someone who plays GTA 5 and you buy the in-game credit cards or whatever, there's nothing wrong with you doing that. You are playing within the rules that this company put down for you, and you're playing the game you want to play. Good for you. Our problem doesn't lie with the player. It's with the industry setting that practice for you. It's the environment that's being built.
Absolutely. And I think that is why I've kind of highlighted this conversation as red flags and green flags. Because the reality is people choose red flags all the time. I mean, look at anyone's dating history. You're gonna see red flags, and those people knew they were red flags at the time, and they just accepted them because of what they got alongside the red flag, or what they thought they were getting. And that's the reality of this conversation, is these are all things that stand out as warning signs that this could be problematic. You as the consumer, as the gamer, have to make that call for yourself. Is this red flag so much of a problem that I'm willing to forego the entirety of this game? Or is it just something I don't like that I have to accept in order to get the game I want?
Well, sometimes you are the red flag, you know? You ever thought about that?
Always.
Oh, yeah.
100% of the time I'm the red flag.
You did say open world as being a red flag. I was going to ask you, is it the open world that's, I don't think so. I think I could be misunderstanding, but are you saying that it's the open world that you don't like? Like, do you prefer the linear, like, let me have a point of direction, kind of like Mass Effect, or even the most recent game I've been playing, like Wukong? Do you like that linear approach where you have a direct way of going? Or is it that it's an open world with just fluff? Because to me, Morrowind is an open world game, and it's my top 5 game for sure. Even though there's open world, you can go.
I was going to ask a very similar question. So
if you released Morrowind today, and I'm talking updated, so make the combat more palatable and so forth, I probably wouldn't play it. I find open worlds in and of themselves quite off-putting. And you're going to need to work hard to convince me that's not the case. It's not the quality of the open world, it's the size and scale. And I generally think that linearity in a game works better than an open world. There are exceptions. Do not get me wrong. There are exceptions, but they're very much exceptions. I find fundamentally the neatness of a linear game and that narrative focus that it allows you to have just speaks to me a lot more. It's like I mentioned before, I feel it respects my time. And sometimes, depending on the game, that odd narrative dissonance. The most famous example I can think of now would be either The Witcher or Skyrim, which I think we've talked about before. The idea that the story is telling you go, 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 but the world is telling you no, no, no. The world is telling you go here first, go do this first. I've been told The Witcher 3 has a great story. Probably does. But I was spending 15 hours in between main story cutscenes because I was going off riding my horse, I was going off doing side quests. So the main story felt really disjointed by the time I would get to it.
What about Red Dead? Because I know you love Red Dead.
Incredible game. Yeah, incredible game. But it's one of those exceptions.
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring.
Yeah.
I love Elden Ring. I think Dark Souls 3 is a better game than Elden Ring.
Yeah.
But that just means I think Dark Souls 3 is a 10 and Elden Ring's a 9.5.
I feel like that is that's probably not something I would have identified as a red flag, just the idea of an open world, because I do think that is kind of a taste thing for me. I'm not a huge fan of open world. I agree with a lot of the things that Com said. And I think as far as delivering a narrative, an open world is more problematic than a hallway simulator, as a lot of people call them. But it can be done well. And I would say, like, I found Skyrim's open world very appealing to me. I was on board with that. And I think it was because of that element of conveyance that they built into the game, where you track every quest separately. It will tell you what, like, the current step of your quest is, and probably give you some map indication of where you need to be to do that next step. I think quality of life elements like that make open world more palatable to me. But my biggest issue with open world is there was a period where open world was advertised as a selling point just for existing. People would advertise their game as saying this is an open world game, as if that was inherently valuable, as that was a reason I should like their game. Some open world games suck. Some very linear games are tremendous. Don't present a choice as if it is inherently correct to me before I even play the game. If open world works for your game, wonderful. But that's not the fact that there's an open world improving the quality of the game. It's the fact that you built your game in a way that works with the open world that you built into your game. It's not better because it's open world. It's better for this game to be open world.
And I think this is where we can go back to the very, very start of the podcast when I was caveating it by saying it's my sort of orange flag. It's not really red. And then Banana got on to say, well, I don't know if red flag is really meaning that you will never play this game. It is, for myself, it's an open world. You're going to have just a lot more work to convince me that you're worth my time, that I'm going to want to invest my time in this. My favorite game, or one of my very favorite games, is an open world. And it's the most barren open world you can imagine, because it's Death Stranding. You just walk around a nothing landscape. And I love it. Yeah. Because they did it so well. It is really just, you are going to have more work to convince me. And in that case, Death Stranding, the fact it was open world pulled it down. But then the fact that it was Hideo Kojima pulled it up. It just becomes one of those pre-game, pre-purchase of the game balancing acts. And if you're an open world, you've just lost some points in there.
Kojima.
That's a lot more points. That's just...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have about...
So that's one of our green flags.
No.
Yeah, Hideo Kojima's name.
Yeah.
Can I add, by the way, it was a green flag that I'm curious as to how you feel about it. For me, it's a real green flag. If a game and a developer allows you direct, immediate access to their modding tools. So if a game is genuinely moddable, does that make a difference for you?
I could care less.
it's not something that will be a deciding factor. It is something I appreciate. It is a green flag as far as that studio to say that like we kind of recognize what the gaming industry is looking for. I don't think it's going to necessarily equate to a good game, but it is an indication that they're at least working in the right direction. They may not have executed it as well as you might hope, but they are not trying to withhold things from people.
For me, it's always quality of life. If I don't put something as a mod unless it's a quality of life feature, like if I need fonts bigger for when I'm reading subtitles, that to me is a quality of life. In Skyrim, I have bigger trees because I just like bigger trees. That's my thing. And when Baldur's Gate, for instance, had their honor mode, very next day, day one, modders made gold dice. So you don't have to actually go through honor mode. You just upload the mod. I'm not a mod person at its core. I like to play the game as intended. And if I do a mod, it's for quality of life only. So I don't care about the creation kits and stuff like that, but it's nice.
I actually was super excited to see that Baldur's Gate 3 just added the in-game mod manager.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just recently.
I thought that was a great update.
I think this is honestly just to pick something that I mentioned, because I think for this it'll actually be quite useful. If you imagine those sort of cosmic scales of whether you're going to play a game, just because a game has modding tools isn't going to make me play it.
Right.
But if there's a lot weighing in favor of it, and then I find out it's got modding tools as well, it'll just be an extra, oh, that's nice.
And that's exactly it. It's an indication that is likely this studio has the right idea about their game.
Yeah. Maybe they're thinking of
might
games.
Not be correct.
Yeah.
But it seems probable that they're actually trying to make a game I want to play.
Yeah, but think about it, seems correct. Mass Effect Andromeda, when it came out, there was no day one DLC, I think. They didn't have a review embargo. They released their reviews a week before the game came out. It was a well-respected publisher. It was a great title. They released trailers. They released video game footage. They did basically everything right in terms of green flags before the game came out.
Then it didn't work.
And then it disappointed.
It didn't work. Yeah. It was horrible.
Yeah, having Mass Effect on the game case was a green flag.
Yeah, exactly. And you can have all the green flags in the world and it can still be bad. You can have all the red flags before it. I think this is probably less likely. And it could still be good. These are just indicators. They're just pushing you one direction or another.
There is one game that I wanted to mention in this discussion just because, I mean, I feel like we've talked about the green flags that this game represents for me and how it avoids a lot of the red flags. Not all of them. Sea of Thieves. So I bought Sea of Thieves, or I don't know if I got it day one. I know I got it very shortly after release. It might have been day one. And I remember playing with my friends and thinking this game is meh. And then coming back to that game a year later, they were still putting out new updates for it. They were adding content. They were fixing things. None of that was paid. I didn't have to give them anything more than the original game price. And that has never changed. That game has been live for like 8 years. I have no idea when it was released. That could be way off, but it feels like forever.
On the same note, has No Man's Sky ever asked for additional money after the initial purchase? Because that's had massive ongoing development. They might have had actual DLC, so. I don't know, but
I can say Power Wash also is in similar vein to, we had discussed that. I thought we had covered it because me and Banana were talking about it before. But Power Wash has had DLCs, but with every DLC, they give away free content. And then they also have free content in between their DLCs. Just the money, the base product alone, you're getting like $40 worth of game in a $20 package.
I would say that I don't think Power Wash has red flags for me. I don't think the DLC they released is a red flag. There's no season pass. There's no microtransactions. I don't think Power Wash has red flags for me. I think the fact that there is free DLC that is occasionally released, that's a big green flag. The idea that they are going to give you additional content because you appreciate their game, you're still playing it. There's not a lot of difference going back to Power Wash. People are still playing that game because it's a pleasant experience. And the fact that they occasionally give you new stuff to wash just for continuing to play the game is wonderful.
I've just done a cursory little research just off to the side on No Man's Sky. It was officially released, so it was released back in 2016, full release. It is ongoing development. They have never charged for a paid DLC. The statements from the company have been, we've already made enough money from this as it is, so it's a passion project now. But they do have an accompanying physical merch store that they use as well for making money for the company. So there's no paid DLC and no subscription.
I think they're looking at the bigger picture because they do have that MMO that's coming out, and I think it's in the same vein of No Man's Sky. So I think they want to keep everybody happy to kind of go into that next stage that they're going to be eventually transitioning. Mm-hmm.
If they're doing the right thing for all the wrong reasons, I'm all right with it.
I did look up the release date for Sea of Thieves, and it was 2018, so 6 years wasn't too far off.
It does feel like it's been around forever. Not in a negative sense. It just feels like it's an ever-present now.
So, red flags, the green flags, we have them. That's the point. And it just really is almost game-to-game basis. But they're not things that say, don't do this or do that. It's more or less things that we look at and say, no, okay, that's not going to appeal to me initially. It's going to have to prove to me whether it's something I want to either continue playing or play at all. So
yeah, I think that's the point that needs to be made, is that none of our red flags are inherently insurmountable. Some of them are going to take a tremendous amount of work. If I genuinely believe that your development company is predatory, I'm really going to need a lot from you to convince me otherwise. But it's not completely insurmountable.
I'm with Banana. Some of these are about as close to insurmountable as you can be, but they always just remain guidelines. None of these so far have been a hard and fast rule, despite some of them getting pretty damn close. And some of them are very, very light red flags.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. Well, then we'll kind of conclude it right there. No doubt, like many of our topics, we'll probably come around to these because I know we love hating on stuff. But in the comments, tell us a game that you like so that we can comment about how Banana hates it. But
yeah. Tell me your favorite game and I'll tell you why you're wrong.
So if you're not already subscribed to the YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the alert so that you get notifications. We are on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music. Yeah. And give those a listen if you can. You always feel free to give it a critique or rating or a comment on those as well. But on YouTube is really where we can easily access those and reply to them. And of course, you get the video. You get the beauty of Com and Banana on the video that you don't
get to see all of Legion's lovely edits.
Do you know what would be fantastic? Is if for any of our listeners or viewers, if they had a place where they could go and discuss this podcast with us.
If only such a place existed.
Is there? Oh, wait a minute. There is. There is a Discord now that Banana has created, and we will have that link in our description as well. But I'm going to hopefully create a little GIF that says, hey, look, we have a Discord, we have a YouTube, blah, 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 all that other stuff when I get time, with all the free time that I have. So with that, I guess we will say goodbye until next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.